Hello, you are about to watch Module 2, Video 2 on Identifying and Understanding Implied Main Ideas. If you have not watched Module 2, Video 1 on Identifying and Understanding Topics and Main Ideas, please watch that video before you start to watch this video. Like the other videos, you will need your textbook, a pencil, a pen, your guided reading and viewing notes, and your vocabulary cards while you watch this video. To review from the last video, the main idea of a paragraph or a text is the point or the message the author is trying to make. So the main idea, again, is the topic plus what the author's feelings are about the topic. That is what your main idea is. You can identify the main idea by asking what the author is saying about the topic. In this video, we're going to talk about main ideas that aren't stated, so they are implied. So it's not going to be like the last video where there's a topic sentence. This one, you have to figure out for yourself what the main idea of this paragraph is going to be about. So, imply means to suggest an idea but not state it explicitly. And explicitly means directly. So the author isn't coming out directly and writing, this is what I'm talking about and this is what I feel about the topic. Okay? You have to kind of guess that for yourself based on the details that are provided to you. So an example of something that is being implied, or when somebody is implying something, would be, if that red striped shirt is back in my closet by noon, I'll forget that it was missing. What is the author or the person that's speaking in this sentence really saying? What is the person implying by this statement? The person is implying that somebody, the author isn't stating exactly who, but that somebody took the author's striped shirt. We know that because it's not in the closet, and the person will forget that it was missing. So that implies that somebody took it. It's not there right now. The author doesn't know who did it, but the author wants the shirt back. So an implied main idea is only suggested. It is not stated outright in a topic sentence like we were looking at in video 1. If we look at this cartoon here, we have a bride and a groom, and we have their car here that's broken down. It looks like it has a flat tire. What does the cartoon imply about the newly married couple? What can we guess from this situation? Okay? If we look at it a little more closely, okay, so it's broken down, the car is broken down, but notice the bride and groom are on opposite sides of the highway trying to hitchhike. So we can imply from this cartoon that their marriage is probably not off to a good start. They probably had a disagreement because they're not getting along. They're trying to go in different directions. Okay, so that's what the illustrator here is implying, that their marriage is not off to a good start. Just like identifying the main ideas when it's stated directly, there are some hints or some methods to use when trying to identify an implied main idea in paragraphs. The first, just like a main idea that's stated directly, is to identify the topic of the paragraph. Figure out what the paragraph is about. That idea, that thing, person, place, okay, the subject of the paragraph. Identify that first. After you do that, use the details that are provided by the author, okay, so the supporting details, to decide what he or she wants you to know about the topic. Okay? So use the supporting details in the paragraph to identify exactly what the author is saying about the topic. Once you've looked at the details, in your own words, write this idea out as a sentence, and that's going to be your implied main idea. Okay? So the details are stated specifically in your paragraph. Okay? There could be 3, there could be 5, there could be 8. The number of details will vary on the paragraph, but you're going to use these details to come up with the main idea. So it might be good to use a chart like this or a graphic organizer to help you with that. Write out the details as they appear in the paragraph, and then connect them, okay, back to your active reading strategies, connect them to come up with a main idea. And remember, the main idea is what the author is saying about the topic. So, if we do an example together, we have a paragraph here, okay? The main idea is not stated explicitly in this paragraph, or it's not stated directly, so we're going to have to come up with it together. So keep that in mind as you follow along with the paragraph. Researchers who study the science of shopping note that men always move faster than women through a store's aisle. Men spend less time looking too. They usually don't like asking where things are or any other questions. When a man takes clothing into a dressing room, the only thing that stops him from buying it is if it doesn't fit. Women, on the other hand, try things on only part of the consideration process, and garments that fit just fine may still be rejected on other grounds. Okay? So we don't have a main idea here. We're going to have to take the details and the topic and put them together to form a main idea. Here's the rest of the paragraph. Here's another contrast. 86% of women look at price tags when they shop. Only 72% of men do. For a man, ignoring the price tag is almost a measure of his masculinity. As a result, men are far more easily encouraged to buy more expensive versions of the same product than are women shoppers. They are also far more suggestible than women. Men seem so anxious to get out of the store that they'll say yes to almost anything. So, what was the topic of the paragraph that we just looked at? It has to do with shopping, right? The shopping habits of men and women. Okay, because it looks at the science of shopping, and we have men and women. So that would be a good topic. Okay, the shopping habits of men and women. It's narrow enough that it doesn't include anything that's not in here, but it's broad enough that it can cover all the details that are described in the paragraph. So we have the topic, shopping habits of men and women. Now, choose the point the author is trying to make about this topic. Now remember, this isn't expressed directly. We have to think back to the details that were discussed. So if you need to go back and look at the paragraph again, that's okay. That can help you with this. So 1, men always move faster than women when shopping. 2, women look at price tags more than men. 3, men and women behave differently when shopping. Or 4, men make more expensive choices when shopping. Which one of these 4 possible answers is the main idea? What the entire paragraph is about, or what the message the author is trying to get across? It's going to be number 3. Men and women behave differently when shopping, because that is the only one that addresses the topic and addresses everything that's in the paragraph. 1, 2, and 4 are all details that support the topic and the main idea. Okay? So if you combine 1, 2, and 4 into one sentence, it would be sentence number 3. That is your implied main idea for this paragraph. We're going to now look at exercise 3.3 on pages 79 to 83. If you haven't completed this practice exercise, please pause the video, complete the exercise, and then start the video over. Exercise 3.3 asks us to use the questions on page 78 to infer the main idea of each paragraph. Now, this is page 78, and the 3 questions that we're supposed to use are used to help us understand inferred main ideas are: what is the topic of the paragraph or passage? Okay. How are the details related or connected to one another? And what idea do the details tell you about the topic? So those are the 3 things that you need to keep in mind as we look at each one of the practice exercises. The paragraph for question number 1. Leonardo da Vinci was the illegitimate son of Piero, a notary from the town of Vinci, and a peasant girl named Caterina, the 3rd wife of Leonardo's father, later bore a son named Bartolomeo, who idolized Leonardo, although he was 45 years younger. After the death of the legendary Leonardo, Bartolomeo attempted an amazing experiment. He studied every detail of his father's relationship with Caterina. Then Bartolomeo, himself a notary by family tradition, returned to Vinci and found another peasant wench who seemed similar to Caterina. According to all Bartolomeo knew, he married her and she bore him a son whom they called Piero. Strangely, the child actually looked like Leonardo and was brought up with encouragement to follow in the great man's footsteps. Surprisingly, the boy became an accomplished artist and was becoming a talented sculptor when he died, thus ending the experiment. Okay. So this is the passage. You're asked to identify the topic, the related details, and then the implied main idea. So if you remember back to video 1, we said if something is mentioned a number of times throughout a paragraph, it's more than likely the topic or connected to the topic. So we have Bartolomeo mentioned a number of times, okay? And then it talks about, the whole paragraph talks about his experiment. So the topic of the paragraph is going to be Bartolomeo's experiment. Okay? Now, if we look back at the paragraph, this sentence here, the one that's underlined, is a pretty important sentence. After the death of the legendary Leonardo, Bartolomeo attempted an amazing experiment. Okay? So the part before this deals with family relationships. Okay? Who Bartolomeo's parents were, grandparents, and then the second part talks about the search for a wife and the outcome of the experiment. Okay, so those are going to be your related details. Family relationships, the search for a wife, and you can even put the outcome of the experiment there if you'd like. So the implied main idea that we can gather from all of this is, by deliberately choosing a wife who resembled Leonardo da Vinci's mother, Leonardo's half-brother, Bartolomeo, was able to father a son who is very similar to Leonardo. That's what this whole paragraph is talking about. That's the message of this whole paragraph. Okay? Is that by choosing a wife who resembled Leonardo da Vinci, his half-brother was able to produce a son who is very similar to him. On to question number 2. The paragraph that goes with question number 2. Perhaps the best way to begin reading poetry responsively is not to allow yourself to be intimidated by it. Come to it, initially at least, the way you might listen to a song on the radio. You've probably listened to a song several times before you hear it at all, before you have a sense of how it works, where it's going, and how it gets there. You don't worry about analyzing the song when you listen to it, even though after repeated experiences with it, you know and anticipate a favorite part and know, on some level, why it works for you. Give yourself a chance to respond to poetry. The hardest part has already been done by the poet, so all you need to do at the start is listen for the pleasure produced by the poet's arrangement of words. We have the word poetry or poet appearing multiple times throughout this paragraph. Okay? So poetry is going to be the topic. It's what the whole paragraph is about. And then the related details, they all kind of deal with how to approach poetry and making it not intimidating. Okay? So we can look at that first sentence, and that first sentence again becomes important. Perhaps the best way to begin reading poetry responsibly is not to allow yourself to become intimidated by it. Okay? So that kind of helps hint at what the main idea is going to be. Then the rest of this describes ways to, or a way to approach poetry so it's not so intimidating, kind of like approaching listening to a song on the radio. So the implied main idea for this passage is going to be, people are intimidated by poetry but there are ways to approach it that are not intimidating. Okay? So we have the topic, poetry, and that it can be intimidating, but there are ways to approach it to make it not intimidating. Okay? That's going to be your implied main idea. Question number 3, paragraph that goes with it. In Argentina, it is bad manners to clear your throat or blow your nose at the table. In Brazil, avoid touching your food with your fingers and be sure to wipe your mouth before taking a drink. When dining with Muslim companions, be careful not to use your left hand for eating, touching others, giving or receiving objects, or pointing. Now this one is a little more difficult than the other two that we looked at. The topic here is a little more difficult to kind of figure out. But if we look at some of the major points here, we have bad manners at the table. Okay? Avoid is a negative thing, something you shouldn't do it, right? So if you shouldn't do it, it's probably bad manners. Okay? Not to use again, that's meaning avoid, something you shouldn't do, so that again is probably bad manners. So the topic of the paragraph is going to be table manners. The related details deal with table manners in Argentina, in Brazil, and with Muslim companions. So those are the 3 areas that this paragraph talks about. So we can then infer that the main idea, because in each different country there are different things you should and shouldn't do, we can imply then that the different cultures have different table manners and require different responses by guests. So depending on where you are, there are different things you should and shouldn't do. And that is supported by the different countries that are looked at in the paragraph. If we look at question number 4, we have, in 1927, social workers in various parts of the United States contributed reports to a study on whether prohibition, which was when they made drinking alcohol illegal, was working. From Cleveland, it was reported that at first the Italian groups thought prohibition affected only whiskey drinkers and went ahead with their wine many times quite openly. In Buffalo, it was said that our Italian people have no conviction that they are doing anything morally wrong in making and drinking their native wines. They cannot understand why prohibition was adopted. Generally speaking, they feel that it is an evidence of fanaticism, and while they are obliged in certain ways to conform to the law, they have no special scruples against violating it. In New York, before Prohibition, Italian Americans bought wine as they bought bread in this new America, as a matter of convenience. Now they make it as they would make bread if bread shops were closed. So the word prohibition appears multiple times, okay, and that idea or that topic, okay, is going to be the topic of the paragraph. That's what the whole thing is about, prohibition. And then the related details, we have the different reports from the different cities. We had one from Cleveland, one from Buffalo, and one from New York. All described whether prohibition was or was not working in the various cities. So from these details, we can infer that prohibition was not working. It was not effective. People were not following it. At least not among Italian Americans in these 3 cities, because each report deals with Italian Americans. So you can even narrow your implied main idea down even more by saying prohibition was not working among Italian Americans in these 3 cities, or you can leave it more general and just say prohibition was not working. And then number 5. Hong Kong is 98% Chinese. Although the official languages are English and Cantonese, the use of Mandarin, Chinese official language, and the one spoken by most Chinese worldwide, is bound to rise. Many other languages and dialects are spoken here, including Hakka, the language of a group of early settlers from China, Tanka, the language of the original boat people who came here some 5,000 years ago, Shanghainese and Chinglish, a mixture of Cantonese and English, among the nationalities living in Hong Kong. Some 30,000 Filipinos make up the largest foreign community. Most are women working as maids and nannies, called amas in local parlance, many of whom socialize on their days off near the Star Ferry and the Statue Park Square. Okay? I know there are a lot of words in here and a lot of things that might not be, or might be hard to understand or you don't know much about, but we have the word Hong Kong appearing twice here, so that would be a hint that the topic might have something to deal with Hong Kong. Okay? And the paragraph goes on to talk about what was spoken there in Hong Kong and the different nationalities living there. So the topic of the paragraph is Hong Kong. Related details are information on the languages spoken and the different nationalities living there. Now, from these two things, we can infer that although Hong Kong is primarily Chinese, it is a multicultural city because we have multiple languages spoken there and people from a lot of different nationalities or a lot of different nations living there. So, although it's primarily Chinese, it's a multicultural city. This concludes the video on identifying and understanding implied main ideas. If you have any questions on this topic, because it's a little more difficult, please make sure you ask your instructor. If you feel comfortable with this topic, you can go on and continue with the rest of the assignments for Module 2.